Cosplay Stitch and Seam. I'm Pannon.
I'm B-Fire.
And I'm David.
Yay!
Yay! We made it. We did another week, you guys.
We did. Very good. For all you listeners at home, if you'd like to reach out to us, you can always do that via email at cosplaystitchandseam@gmail.com or
you can go to the website, cosplaystitchandseam.com, and fill out the contact form there, or
go to the Facebook page, join our fantastic community, send us your thoughts, your what you're working on our Work in Progress Wednesdays. We have this awesome group of people that want to see what you're working on and help build you up along the way. We also have an awesome Discord in case if you're not a big fan of a lot of the bigger social medias. We totally get that. Our Discord's really chill as well. It's not one of those ones that just 5 million messages in a day. It's got a great dedicated group of people that want to hear what you're saying. And while you're on the internet, if you want to help out the show, we've got several different ways of doing that. Leave us a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts, on Audible, Podchaser, and now on Spotify. Those will really help us out. That helps the algorithm. And if you've got a few bucks kicking around and you want to help us out, you can send us a few dollars at our coffee account, KOFI, Cosplay Stitch, or our Patreon, patreon.com/Cosplay Stitch. For $3 a month, we can give you a shout out on the show every single episode. And for $5 a month, not only do you get all of that, but you also get to join our live stream Cosplay Chronicles.
Woo!
It was a really great game last time. I cannot wait to see the repercussions of it for the next D&D game. So if you enjoy all of that, please make sure you go to our patreon.com/Cosplay Stitch.
Excellent. And did you know that Fox Beauty Cosmetics has a brand new store? It's at foxbeauty.store. Super easy to remember. And remember that's Fox with 2 X's, beauty.store. You can still use our promo code Stitch and Seam to get your 10% off your purchase of all vegan, not tested on animal products. So we are so excited to have you all today. We have more people in the community who work on creative activities and things outside of just building their cosplay. We've had recipe authors, and we've had people who do makeup, like our Fox Beauty. And today we have another guest. We have Andrew Liptak. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm a writer, journalist, and cosplayer, and I wrote a book called Cosplay, A History.
Excellent. And where can we find you online?
I can be found at a whole bunch of places. I'm on Twitter at Andrew Liptak. I am on Instagram. Completely forgetting my Instagram handle because I always look at it, Liptak AA. Somebody at one point I was at Andrew Liptak, but then I deleted it and then it came back and it was gone.
Oh no.
But mostly I can be found at a newsletter that I write called Transfer Orbit. It's transfer-orbit.ghost.io, which is no small mouthful.
Nice. So obviously writing a book is a huge undertaking, and especially cosplay oriented. What got you into cosplay from the very beginning?
So I've been doing this for, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, we need the title of the book so listeners know what book we're talking about.
He said it.
Oh, he did?
I did say it.
Yeah.
Cosplay.
I can give you the full
David.
title. I only gave you half the title, so
that's
that makes
why.
sense.
Okay, I was like, where's the full title?
So it's called Cosplay, A History, the builders, fans, and makers who bring your favorite stories to life, which is, I've almost got down to a full breath.
That's why I was confused. I was like, wait, there's supposed to be more to that title.
It's just a little easier to say Cosplay, A History. It sort of gets the whole idea in a couple words, 3 words to be exact. So
I love it.
So I got into cosplay, let's see, way back.
I know you addressed it in the book itself, right?
A little bit, yeah. So I got interested in, so it basically goes back to when I first saw Star Wars for the first time in 1997 with the special editions. I was in middle school. I was, an impressionable young kid, and my parents took me to go see Star Wars because it had been re-released. And I was glued to the screen, and on the way back home, I just remember distinctly feeling that the stormtroopers were the coolest costumes that I'd ever seen. And basically about to the end of high school, I was like, I really want to make one of these costumes. And I wasn't quite sure how. I don't know if it ever really occurred to me to use cardboard to make one or what, but it was just something that I had always just sort of entertained. That would be really cool. maybe in shop class I could make it out of metal. No, that's going to be really hard, and it just never got around to it until I senior year when I was in band. We played Star Wars for our final concert, and we were able to get a member of the 501st Legion to come up. So this would have been 2003. And it was, we had this guy come up. I live in Vermont. He came all the way up from Rhode Island, which is about a 5-hour drive thereabouts for just like the night he came up and then went back the same night. And it just blew me away just to see a stormtrooper in real life before me for the first time. And he ended up giving me information on how to buy one. Went out and that summer I had a summer job, got a bit of a bonus. So I was like, oh, wait, I know exactly what I'm going to do with this. Sent off a check. And by the end of the summer, it arrived, big brown box, unpacked it, put it together, probably within a couple of hours, which is not really how you're supposed to do it. At that time, the kit, it's called an FX kit. It's basically you get a box of pre-cut armor, and it came with like this really cheap Velcro. I basically put the Velcro on and had it assembled. That Velcro didn't last very long. They recommend that you use industrial strength Velcro and then I end up years later gluing it together and actually properly reassembling it after I had sort of when I got a little bit more into the 501st. So that's basically when I started. I would basically take it out for Halloween and for like college, not really college parties, but like, college, I took it out a couple of times when I worked at a bookstore. So for Halloween, I brought it out. And I worked at a summer camp where I would use it for skits and whatnot. And that's basically where I got my start. The first convention I went to was Star Wars Celebration in Indianapolis. That was
sweet.
Celebration 3. So right in time for Revenge of the Sith while I was in college. And then when I got out of college, I actually had a job, I had free time, and I had a car. And so that's when I sort of got more into it. I could, drive around New England to other events that we were holding. So my first one with the rest of the group was a big parade down in Woburn, Massachusetts. And then I basically just started going to whichever ones I could. It was a Saturday morning. I'd get up at 3 or 4 in the morning, drive down, do the event, come back, and did a ton of a ton of those sorts of things all over the place. And that's basically where I got started. And once I got more into it, after college, I began to build my own. Started looking at other troopers, like I could build that. And so the next one I built, and actually it's very appropriate for today. We're recording this May 16th. Today is the 20th anniversary of Attack of the Clones. So my next one was a clone trooper from Attack of the Clones. Not my favorite film out of the franchise, but the design is one of my favorites.
Sure.
And so I did the same thing. I think I went onto eBay for that one, which is also not really what you're supposed to do. Because what I ended up with was a kit that had been recast, and it was a little bit soft pulls and just, it was just a little bit of a mess, but so it took a little bit more work, but I still trooping it today. And it's a really fantastic, I'm happy with how it came out, and I still use it, when did I get that? I probably got it 2008, 2009. And I've since then I've just built a whole bunch of other ones. I've got a short trooper from Rogue One, First Order, heavy trooper from The Force Awakens, and a couple of other random ones from around the science fiction universe. I've got a jumpsuit from Moon, the Duncan Jones film. I've got a belter. Man,
really?
Yes.
I actually cool. I love that movie.
It's a great movie, and it's one of my favorite costumes to bring out because all it is a gray jumpsuit and patches, and I love bringing it to a convention because it's comfortable. It's got really deep pockets that I can just shove anything I need to into them, but also like that one person will recognize it and think, oh, that's my favorite movie. And I actually got whenever I finished it, I sent a picture to Duncan Jones on Twitter, and he was like, "That's really great." So I got the director's seal of approval.
That's so cool.
Anytime I go to like a convention, like that's an easy one to throw in because it rolls up, and I just need to wear a pair of sneakers. And I've got like the screen accurate watch and a couple of other random things that go along with it.
Thanks.
And other jumpsuits.
That's too cool.
I got a belter jumpsuit from The Expanse, and
yes!
Daniel Jackson
Okay.
from Stargate SG-1. So
You're
all,
now like
all those
my
are really
favorite
easy.
person.
So clearly you love cosplay. You are super into it. Like, what made you jump from I want to like build these screen accurate pieces and collect like screen accurate props and things to going like I want to make a whole book about cosplay?
I have a master's degree in history, and I need to put some use to it.
What a way to do that, though.
Well, so along with this cosplay journey I've been on, a lot of it has been. I've also been a writer, so I've been a writer and journalist. My first job was at a university, and sort of to in between downtime and sort of just to keep myself occupied because it was extremely boring. I started writing for places like IO9, which is Gizmodo's science fiction blog. And SF Signal, Kirkus Reviews, and I basically started writing about the history of science fiction, book reviews, and just other stuff like that. And so that sort of pulled me in sideways to become a journalist. 2015, I left. I was IO9's weekend editor for a year. I went over to another site called The Verge, and just sort of along the lines, I fell into journalism and covered technology and entertainment. And so somewhere like around 2016, so this was a little bit before I started at The Verge, but I had known a whole bunch of folks in the science fiction fantasy community. And I knew, because I'd been reviewing the books, an editor named Joe Monty reached out to me. He's the lead editor at an imprint called Saga Press, which is from Simon & Schuster. And this was just after San Diego Comic-Con, and he basically called, we arranged a phone call, and I'd met him a couple times before, and it was basically like, I came across these guys called the 501st at the convention. I know you remember. Is there a story here that we can, talk about, or we could, that's worth, writing about? And so it's like, yeah, it's this big thing. I think at that point it wasn't quite the 20th anniversary. But it was one of those things where
still is like, yes, there's so much you can talk about it.
Yeah. And so I basically, my agent at the time, and I came up with an outline, and basically it was a blow by blow account of how the 501st came about. And it just didn't go anywhere. There was just a couple of little, logistical roadblocks here and there. And it just, at some point it was just like, all right, I gotta, I have to move on from this and find something else to do, because I can't it's just the way sort of tons of projects happen. But while I was working on it, I had begun to realize that I can't just tell the story of the 501st Legion, because it's basically one star in a galaxy. There's a lot more before and after it. And in order to sort of put the 501st in context, you need to go back to say, why do people start dressing up in costumes in the first place? And once you start pulling on that thread, you go back to 1977 with this first Star Wars films. Then you go back further to 1960s when Star Trek came out, and then back to the 1930s when we started having science fiction conventions. And then if you pull even more, you go even further and further back to answer the question, why do we dress up in costume at all? And so that's sort of a bunch of those things sort of clunked into place, and that's where the big broad strokes of the book started to come into focus for me. Because the books, because I started to ask this question of like, how do we start dressing up as our favorite characters in the first place? And it goes back a long, long way, because it's just sort of an innate human condition. We're storytelling creatures. We like to do that. And when we're telling a story, we like to pick up a prop and, to help with the storytelling. It brings that world into focus just a little bit more. And it helps, it's a sort of an immersive thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the first half. Then the back half is, all right, so what are all the other little bits and pieces that sort of fall into place that explain how cosplay came to be? There's a really great book, and I'm a big fan of, called The One Device by a guy named Brian Merchant, and it's a history of the iPhone. And what he did is he didn't do sort of a blow by blow account of how the iPhone came about, like, all right, Steve Jobs did this, and then this team did this. He went and actually explored all these different elements of it. Like, so where does the camera, like, what's the technology behind the cameras? Where did that come from? Where does the materials that make the iPhone itself come out? What are the stories of the people who are actually assembling it. How do they fit in? And it's a very holistic, story, and that sort of got me to thinking, like what are the types of things within the cosplay field that have changed how we actually go about making costumes? So I started looking to the history of 3D printing, history of a little bit of history of plastics, how like the techniques that we use, like building stuff out of foam, and all these elements are all part of the story of cosplay. And as you sort of examine all these different bits, you see how things start to come together. So it's not just the entertainment side, but it's also the actual like logistical and practical side of how this came about. And alongside all that, you have this big cultural thing going on where science fiction and fantasy things are now very popular. So how does that figure into the bigger picture? So it's basically this big patchwork quilt of entertainment and technology and social community building that comes together into this one story. And hopefully it all comes together in a coherent fashion. It's been sitting in my head since 2016. It's been sitting as a manuscript for a couple of years. So now that it's actually coming out and people are reading it, it's like, hopefully that all works together in the way that I sort of feel like Charlie against the Always Sunny backdrop with all the lines and stuff. I didn't quite go that far.
I actually really appreciated that. Like, I have seen several articles on like the history of cosplay and like where it started and where it came from. But like, I felt like yours was a lot more expansive. It was a lot more like it covered so many different groups and so many different like ideas that all, come back to cosplay.
You covered a lot of the galaxy.
Yeah. So that was actually going to be...
I covered a small part of the galaxy. This is totally a history, and I don't think it's entirely comprehensive, because what I was finding as I was writing it, every time I would turn over a rock, there's 5 other stories to talk about or
Right.
people to do, and I literally ran out of time to write it. I had a deadline and I had to turn something in, and I'm happy with how it came out. Don't get me wrong. I think it covers a very broad swath of stuff, but there's always like that. Shoot, I should have done this thing or this. I could have done a little bit more with this. One of the things I wanted to do was a chapter about furries, and I just didn't get the time to do that. Another one was KKK masking laws and like what impact that had on Halloween costumes throughout time, and even up to like, I think there's still laws in the books that sort of prevent people from wearing masks that date back to that period. Mm-hmm. That was something I wanted to dig into, just never quite got around to it. Plus, there's so many people in the cosplay world that, everybody has their own story and everybody makes up a little part of the bigger story. Right. So it's still a very vast thing to explore. And I'm planning on still doing some of that. I mentioned I have a newsletter. One of the things I'm hoping to do this summer is to do like a lost chapters.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Thing where I'll actually get to some of those things, time and energy depending. But yeah, let's fingers crossed. I'm starting to. Yeah. I've got a list, which is the first step.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. Was like it covers a lot, and I was kind of wondering how you built that web and like how you decided like which topics would be important to you in your storytelling.
Yeah, so I started with. Basically, anytime I do any type of writing, I try to do a bit of an outline, whether it's like a short essay or a newsletter post or a book. So I had started with the history of the 501st, and I basically come up with a blow-by-blow account of how the 501st came about. So I was pretty familiar with that, and that was sort of like a good anchor point, sort of in the middle of the story, because I can speak pretty clearly about that. My story is sort of intertwined in there, and then. A lot of it was just a matter of putting together a timeline of cosplay stuff. And actually it was kind of funny because I didn't actually put together a timeline until like I was done with the book. Like a lot of this sort of came together naturally, but like I knew I had written about science fiction and fantasy history. So I knew about Forrest Ackerman going to the first World Con in 1939. Mm-hmm. And so that was a point that I could put a definite pin in the timeline. And then, I knew I wanted to go, further back, and there's been some articles about this sort of thing. So I would find other things that came earlier, and then some of it was also just going through documents. There's a great organization called FANAC, which is a fan history organization, and they basically document all of the original, basically fandom history. So a lot of the original documents from the early World Cons, the letters that they would send out to the members ahead of time, the programs, photographs, they had a lot of that stuff documented. So going through that pretty much convention by convention was a really useful thing for me to do, because I was able to sort of say like, all right, they are dressing up in costume here, and then now actually ahead of this convention, they're talking about dressing up. And so that to me was significant. And then as you read these documents, you sort of see over time that it becomes this established fixture within the fan community, where it had been like when Forrest Ackerman showed up. And I should probably back up and explain. Forrest Ackerman was a prominent fan in the 1930s, 40s, and beyond, who basically at this convention in New York, the first ever World Science Fiction Convention, he showed up in costume as an H.G. Wells character from a Thing Beyond, World Beyond. No, that's not it. World Set Free. I can't, off the top of my head, I'm blanking on the title. And everybody was like, what the hell are you doing? This is weird. But then the next year they went back and did it again. And a whole bunch of them got together in costume, and they went down to a local newspaper office, and they were like, we're here for our interview because we're time travelers from the future, and we saw it in the paper. And the newspaper people were like, no, get out. But you sort of see how this becomes this really zany, weird thing that people do, and then it becomes this established part of fandom. Star Trek comes along, and it goes from being this fixture that, people would only dress up during the masquerade because that's when you'd want to do it. People start wearing Spock's ears and the uniform because it's really comfortable to wear, and it's like regular clothes. That's an evolution. And then so it's basically just finding stuff like that. Also, interviews. I know a lot of people within the science fiction and fantasy communities who were willing to talk with me. I would go out and search out people and cosplayers who are at that time they would just call them fans or masquerade costumers or whatever. Then I talked to modern day cosplayers who are currently doing stuff. People who were, and whenever I came across a topic I didn't know much about, I'd go out and ask somebody who knew a little bit more than me. So talk to people who knew more about 3D printing, and they were able to point me to another person, and talk to some of the higher profile cosplayers who have a much bigger following, and talked about their experiences, and talked to people who are cosplayers of color and women and trans and non-binary folks, and just to get their perspectives and their input on like, what does this world look like to them? And it basically just sort of came together like that. It just lots of interview time. I have an entire bookshelf right next to me here of books that sort of are all about cosplay or costuming or fandom or entertainment history that I would, that were really useful. There's things about ranging from, the history of Halloween, which was another sort of significant thing that I really wanted to cover, because that's where a lot of people start costuming. So I wanted to get a sense of like, where did that come from? Like, why do we start? Like, how did that tradition come about? And learn some really kind of fun things along the way there. Like trick-or-treating used to be a Thanksgiving thing around the New York City area, which I had no idea about.
What?
There was something, they would call themselves ragamuffins. And my theory is that the parents would throw the kids out because they were making food. Kids would go from door to door. Kids would go from door to door and beg for pennies or apples or candy. And if they weren't given food, they would carry like a sock full of flour, and they would like hit the door, so they'd warn other kids that like this family or this household doesn't give out anything.
Wow.
And it was a bit of a mischief thing. And there would be little parades. There would be tooting on like little brass horns, and it was apparently a really big nuisance. And it was largely confined to like the New York City metropolitan area. And there's actually still like a Ragamuffin Day parade that's still held around the same time. But after Macy's Day parade came about, that got sort of moved over into trick-or-treating. And then, the whole Halloween industrial complex spins up, and it becomes more of a Halloween thing. So
I'm like kind of tempted to do that now. They're not giving me food, I'm going to throw stuff at their door.
Yeah. So it was one thing. Another thing I really wanted to do, I knew from sort of the onset, is I really wanted to cover reenacting, and just because I sort of see that as a not a cosplay thing, but it's under the same umbrella. It's because it's somebody relating to a story, and whether or not it's a fictional story or a non-fictional story. So when I was interviewing some folks last year, I went to World War II weekend in Pennsylvania, and I was talking. It was a big event. Reenactors from all over the place. Every single nation that fought in World War II was represented in some way. And like I was talking to some of the guys who were dressed up as American soldiers, and they're exactly the same types of people that were dressing up as stormtroopers. So there's that sort of the same similar mindset of like we like the story, we want to portray it as accurately as possible by getting the costumes and the uniforms just right. So that was a very cool experience.
With all of this research and data that you've just had to dig through, I can't imagine that like sometimes your brain just turns into a sieve, right? Like only some things stay and some things kind of fall out. But like you cover such a wide array of the history to group dynamics to cosplay is not consent, all these things. Is there like a fact or something that like you stumbled across and you were like has stayed in your mind or has been like so like the main thing of like, oh, I can't believe this or that? Like it's that one piece that stayed in your head no matter what.
I think it was a big part of that or a big thing was the Halloween, learning that Halloween had not always been trick-or-treating had not always been a Halloween thing, and that it had moved, it had sort of migrated over. And to be fair, or to be clear, there's always been sort of a costuming element at times to Halloween, depending on like how far back you go. And there's other sort of masked traditions. But that was a really kind of a fun one just because it was just very, I'd never heard it before, even though Halloween is such a big thing. And it's growing. And so it was just kind of a neat thing to highlight there. I think the other thing that I was really kind of surprised at, or I thought it was very cool to learn, was the reason that, or one of the reasons that 3D printing has exploded in the past, I don't know, decade or so, is a large part because patents have expired on the original technology. So as those patents have expired, more companies are jumping into the fray to make their own devices. And as a result, the cost has come down to the point where you can afford one of these devices. I have one in my house right now. And
I have two and one and three at my work.
Yeah, like it's like my local library has one. Like and that, when these started out, there were multiple thousands and thousands of dollars. So the fact that you have a price point that comes down to a couple $100 means that like a serious hobbyist can afford to put that in their home. And that revelation helped drive home a couple things to me, especially like when it came to access and like why does cosplay how has it become such a mainstream thing? And I think a big part of that is just because is it becomes easier it becomes more affordable to. There was a tweet that had gone around the same time I had been writing the book. I can't remember it's cited in the book, and I can't remember who it is off the top of my head. But she was talking. It was a woman talking about a fan named I think Penwiper, who had basically put together some of the definitive instructions on how to make foam armor or armor out of foam. Oh, yes. And it sort of went viral within some of the cosplay things, not just recently. I just saw it pass by the other day. But it was one of those things that sort of reminded me that when I was getting into the 501st Legion, about $500 to buy a set of armor, which, for a kid just out of high school is a lot of money. And groups like the 501st or other, if you want to join, you have to basically put a lot of money into the making of a costume in order to get something that's provable and then join. That's a barrier to a lot of people who you might be a big Star Wars fan, but if you can't afford, $500, you can't afford 500, you can't get into the group. Or if that's not the low end. And that's not really, I'm not trying to knock the 501st in any way. I think that there's a good reason for a lot of the fairly high standards and just the techniques that go into it. Plus it's a lot of work and energy and stuff that goes into making those sorts of armor kits. But when you expand that access, when you drop the price point down so you can make a stormtrooper out of foam, or you still wouldn't be able to join the 501st because they won't let it has to be a plastic armor, but
Yeah.
you can still make a stormtrooper
Mhm.
with, if you have a 3D printer, or if you have access to a 3D printer, that cost goes down significantly. And that, I think, is one of the big reasons why cosplay has gone up. So as I was writing it, I realized that this is not just a fan story; it's also an economic story, because you are it's about it's one of those factors, and how does this community evolve and grow, and it grows because more people can come into it, more people can afford to come into it, more people realize that it's a thing, and so forth. So
the evolution of social media as well, because like when I first started cosplaying, like I had like just barely started on like Facebook. I was moving away from my MySpace account, and like those first few years were hard because it's like I couldn't find many tutorials out there where like nowadays you just type in how to make specific characters, specific prop, and you'll find someone who's made it already.
Yep.
And you can get ideas from that, and I love that.
Yeah, the transfer of information is incredible. So Adam Savage, I was able to interview him for the book, and he provided the foreword to it, and I interviewed him at his cave in San Francisco, and that was one of the things he talked about was just the incredible resource that something like YouTube has provided, because you can. One of the things he says is that somebody might have filmed it, any technique. It might not be filmed very well, but somebody has taken the time to point a camera at what they're doing, and you can that's a transfer of knowledge right there. For all the other problems that YouTube has, that has been one of the really incredible resources. And actually, when anybody asks me what is the most important technology that within the cosplay community, I don't say it's 3D printing or something like that. I think it very firmly it is social media platforms, because it allows you to transfer that knowledge very, very easily. But it also helps you expand the community as a whole, because it puts all your friends into one bucket, and you can, if you go to a convention and people take pictures of you and tag you, your aunt sees it, your coworkers see you in costume, your high school friends, and some of them will be like, "What?" And some of them will be like, "Oh, that looks really cool. I kind of want to do that now because I like this thing, and I have, I didn't realize this was a thing until now, but it's so much fun not to."
I know.
So
Anyway,
I really
yeah.
liked how you included like things like construction, things like political aspects of cosplay. But one of the things I was like pleasantly surprised and really intrigued in was that you included identity. What made you decide to keep that in your book?
Well, it was an absolutely essential thing. I've got friends who are trans and non-binary, and there's an intrinsic part of cosplay that is. You can be very true to yourself. You can be true to yourself as a fan, like I'm a super Star Wars fan, or I'm a super fan of Moon or District 9 or The Expanse or whatever. But there's also the ability to you can transform how you look. You can switch genders just by changing your clothing or your makeup, or your hair, or you can change your how you stand. You can do all of that. So I've always thought that was an essential thing, because it's an outlet for some people to be able to express their true self, whether in whatever form that is. And yeah, that I think that's an incredibly important part, also because it's a very diverse community. If I just talked to people who look just like me, it would be a very different story. And there's sort of an interesting thing that I've looked at over the years is like, the 501st is a very fairly male dominated organization. I guess you could probably call it like the suburban dad version of cosplay, because that's, the people who can afford the armor are, we're guys who, and women and other people, obviously, but like, predominantly white guys who saw Star Wars at a formative age. And we, after college and high school, we got jobs and we got some money and a house and the ability to make this stuff. And that's sort of how it looks. But that's obviously not the entirety of it. I also, as I've worked as a journalist, I was very privy to seeing the sad puppies and the Gamergate scandals come about, and saw that there, the impact that they had, and sort of the reactionary nature against the movement of more women and non-binary and trans and non-white people coming into fan spaces. And I think, and that's not something that's also new. That if you go back as far as Star Trek or even further back, you see these same sorts of reactions happen when people who are now non-white men come into these spaces. Star Trek brought an incredibly large number of women into science fiction and fantasy, and in doing so, they helped bring about things like fan fiction and cosplay, because it just wasn't things that was sort of set in stone that fans did. And I think that bringing in that diversity of voices and experiences and lived experiences is important. I hope I hit the right notes and I got things right.
Absolutely.
I tried to talk with people from a pretty wide range of backgrounds and lifestyles and identities. And as I said, I just think it was to me, it was a no-brainer. It's
it was
something that was
actually my
essential
favorite
to do.
part.
Good. Okay.
I really enjoyed that.
I can say that's one of my favorite things too, because I was at a wedding the other day. Hannah knows. David knows.
And now I know.
Yeah, now you know, yes. But it got to the part with dancing, and my best friend's like, "Hey, come and dance with me," and I'm like, "No." I'm like, I'm not drunk, and I am not dressed as a man. I'm not going to go dance. I'm like, I am Mercedes right now, but if I was dressed as this Mad Hatter character that I absolutely adore, I would be out there dancing. I got Dance King at a dance once because of him. But it's like, I love that cosplay is an exploration of identity, of who you can be, what you can be, and I don't know, it's my favorite thing about it too.
I know when I put on a Stormtrooper helmet, I can definitely feel my demeanor change a little bit, just because it sort of lets you. I am not somebody who will ever dance in person. Like, I barely danced at my own wedding. It's not something I do. I put armor on, and I've been Weird Al's backup dancer for 3 or 4 times at this point. So
that's cool.
It's definitely something that you can sort of get into character, and it can be a little bit more natural for you. Weird Al on his tours will, not the current tour he's currently on, but like some of his past tours where he brings out all the costumes and all the music videos and all the set stuff. He and his team would reach out to local 501st units and say, "Hey, we need 3 or 4 stormtroopers to sort of dance in the back of Saga Begins." And we show up, we get a brief dancing lesson for, this is what you have to do with this beat, this is what you have to do here, and then we shuffle up on stage and we dance. You can go up on YouTube and find it, and you'll see me there.
Amazing.
It's a lot of fun. He's also the nicest guy in the world too, so which is awesome. He took the time to meet with us. I've got my helmet signed, so
that's so cool. So we've talked about several of the important points that you make in your book. If someone were to read it, what is the most important one you would want them to take away from it?
That's a really good question. I think I would have to say that this is not a story about technology. It's not a story about Star Wars, super fans. It is about super fans. At its core, what it's about is it's about community, and it's about this massive worldwide movement where you can, of people who have this shared experience of dressing up as their favorite character, and usually building that costume, putting it on, inhabiting that character for a bit, and just being able to share that sense of fandom, that sense of enthusiasm and love for those stories with one another. And I've done this. I've gone across the country, for work travel or wherever. And, I've reached out to local 501st groups and say "Hey, I'm from this garrison. I'm going to be in town. Can we go, get together?" And, we get together, and it's like, I've fallen into a group of people I haven't seen in ages, even though I've never met them.
Oh, that's so cool.
I go to conventions, and you can easily just strike up a conversation with somebody, just by asking them, they're like, what's your favorite part of this? How'd you build this? What's your favorite part of it? While I was researching the book, I went to a whole bunch of conventions. I went to Star Wars Celebration 2019. I went to Dragon Con, San Diego San Diego Comic-Con I've been to before, some of the local ones, and basically, my go-to question was, can I take a picture of you in your costume? And, it looks great. And that was, it was a very easy thing to do. Just being able to have this common thing that we both do. So I think that's at the core. It's a story about community. Internet communities, convention communities, 501st communities, fan communities. It's all sort of like this little, like one of those Russian dolls that, stacks. you have a little one and a bigger one and a bigger one. And that's basically what it is. Like at the heart of it, it's like cosplay is, it's a small group of people that locally, and then regionally, and then nationally and internationally, or just on your own social networks. Like, you might have, a small group, might, have this small circle of people that, on Instagram or on Facebook. It's Facebook communities that, are devoted to building this one specific character. And so
I'm on a few of those.
Yeah, no, I'm part of a group called Shore Trooper Fam, and I'm convinced that the reason that we see the Shore Troopers show back up in The Mandalorian is because that there are people who are still actively building them. Lucasfilm probably had the costumes just kicking around, but there's still there's actually a very strong contingent of people who still dress up as them. Whereas you don't really see that with like the Rise of Skywalker with the Sith Troopers. Part of that, it's a much more complicated costume, but like there's just more enthusiasm for the Shore Trooper in at least from what I've seen. And so, yeah, it's just there's all these like interlocking circles of communal of excellence. And that's basically what drives this whole thing. It's what allows the information to transfer from one person to another person. It's what it allows their enthusiasm to go from group to group or from generation to generation in some cases. And it's just this long chain of interactions that just at the core, it's all about how much we love these particular stories. So that's the long-winded answer of version of it.
I love it.
Oh, I love that.
With all that, like, it is about community, and even though it has that, there are still those, exclusives, the, Gamergates and things like that out there. How can we make it so that our communities be more inclusive and positive influences on our newer cosplayers so that we can kind of start letting those things kind of go more away, which I think the community has done pretty good on, but how can we continue that?
It's a very welcoming group of people because there's a lot of enthusiasm for those, for recognizing excellence and encouraging people. I think at the core, it's basically just that. It's being excellent to one another and just sharing, being open with how you build stuff. Like one of the things that has bothered me over the years is when I'll see people in some of the groups I'm part of, and they're like, "Oh, I'm doing a secret project, but I can't tell you what it is, but I want to surprise you all at the convention." It's like, and the sense of surprise is it's a very selfish thing, I think, in a lot of ways, because all you're doing is you're just sort of withholding information, or you're just sort of keeping it in your corner for whatever reason. And I think that tendency is not a great one to have, just because it deprives the larger group of information, of enthusiasm and things like that. So I'm not a big fan of I'm doing a secret project if there's no reason other than just I want to keep it a secret until the convention, which is it's your choice. But there's also people who are this is my corner of the corner of the cosplay world, and I'm the only person who can make these. And the problem with that is the cat's out of the bag. With 3D printing and YouTube and whatever, you can replicate those and do just fine. There's always this sort of gatekeeping tendency, and the other component here, and it's a little ironic because I'm a 501st member, but we actually have gates that we keep. In that we try to make sure that we have if you want to be a member, you have to adhere to certain standards, which I think is fine. Membership, the 501st is not the end all and be all of Star Wars cosplay. Mm-hmm. If you want to make and I've seen people who are like, oh, I want to do a custom Sith, or I want to do this type of stormtrooper that's painted in this crazy paint scheme. You can't join the 501st at that, but go ahead and do it. That's if that's what you really want to do, you're go do that, because that's the, that lets your creativity fly. I do think, though, that, there are points where, people can get super, like, accuracy nerd on others, like, oh, that's not how that's supposed to be. Or one woman I spoke with who, she's an African-American cosplayer, dresses up as Zelda. And, people are like, well, Zelda isn't black. Like, well, cosplay doesn't have to adhere, you are not, it's not, you realize it's not the actual game, right? It's a person who's interpreting it themselves. And, I think that it's great that people can sort of see them, they can build costumes to make them see themselves in those characters, even if it's not, canonical. And, canon doesn't, unless you're in the 501st, or, canon doesn't really matter if in cosplay. You can do whatever you want. You can mash up Deadpool with everything and nobody will blink an eye. You can mash up a stormtrooper with just about anything and nobody will blink an eye. But if, like, you change the skin tone of your fictional fantasy character and all of a sudden, reality collapses, that's an attitude that I think is irritating. And I really hope that people will not do that anymore. I think it's just, people have a very powerful sense of ownership over the things that they're fans of, and they want to see them represented correctly, but not really recognizing that, correctly is, this very loose definition. It doesn't, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. Like my stormtroopers and short trooper and stuff, they're not the most screen accurate things in the world. I'll be the first to admit that, but they're good enough for me. And any general member of the public that I come into contact with is not going to know the difference between whatever the highest tier level of accuracy is for a stormtrooper versus, whatever just gets me in the door. Ultimately those sorts of things don't matter to me. It's just, that's sort of my rant on super screen accuracy things. But also, it's just in some ways it seems like it's really stressful because if you make one little change, it's like not quite screen accurate anymore because you get this scuff somewhere, or if you have like a paint drip or something.
Which is mind-boggling sometimes, because like so many cosplayers love the, battle damage or giving it that lived-in effect. And if you have to live that screen accuracy, then do you really get to have that same quality of experience? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That said, I do think it's really great to try to get it a costume as close as possible to what you see on screen, because there's a level of fidelity. If you build a really crappy stormtrooper, people will say like, oh, it's a really crappy stormtrooper. I build stuff to the level that I build them to for me. And to, maintain my status in the 501st and to make sure they don't kick me out. But I do think it's good to try to build so that it looks right and it looks like what you see in the film, just because the closer and closer you get, there's sort of the crafting element, there's the how it looks to the general public, even if the general public doesn't quite understand, oh, this is the most accurate belt buckle or hat or gloves or whatever. They will still see it and recognize it for what it is. And the closer you get to accuracy, the closer, the easier it is to recognize that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But then again, you're dealing with a public that will regularly confuse Darth Vader or a TIE pilot with Darth Vader or whatnot, and that's fine. They're not as big fans. They're not as, I don't want to say as big of a fan. They're not as immersed in the fan world as the person who's dressing up as that costume. So that's sort of my long-winded and convoluted approach to that. I think that ultimately, though, I think it's just, people just, the best thing for any community is people just need to be kind. They need to listen, and sort of approach things in a constructive and maybe not judgmental, approach. And I think that, you approach these things with empathy and compassion and recognizing the enthusiasm that's embedded in those builds, that goes a long way. So just don't be judgmental. Don't be, etc.
So I used to like be really well, still am. I love details. I love pulling out all the little details in a costume and whatnot, but it used to not be about the details. It used to be about the accuracy and being the most accurate of anything out there. And it made me bitter. And it's a funny thing that's brought up is that that's actually why I started the Stitch and Seam, was to humble myself. Because I started showcasing cosplayers that were not me and their work, and realizing, the real core of this is putting a little bit of yourself into it and finding yourself through cosplay. And now, like, I still love details, but I don't get so hung up on them. Or like if I see someone else wearing the same cosplay, I'm not like, oh, they're missing this, this, and this, and that's why it's not good. I stopped doing that.
I think details are really important just because they sort of set the costume apart, and it like attention to detail is like one of those things that you can just, and it basically, it's like a money pit. You can just dump an incredible amount of money into it just to get, and it's a sort of a feudal thing. But so a really fun example I have for this is a bunch of years ago, when I had a couple of years into cosplaying, my aunt and uncle it was around Halloween time. They were making costumes for like I don't know, it was like a family Halloween party or something. And I think she said they wanted to do peanut butter and jelly. And so she told me what she's going to do. We're going to take two trash cans, cut the hole at the top and on the arms, and paint them up and make them look a little bit like that. And I said, so if you want to make it stand out, here's what you do. You get the front label, right, what they'd been planning on doing, turn it around and put a barcode on the back. Because that's one of those details, and I think they went and did it. It's one of those details that will just make it memorable, because it shows that you have paid you've put a lot of thought into a costume. You sort of recognize that you're getting more than just the broad strokes, and you're putting in other things that the more you look, the more detail that pops out, and you can sort of. It's more of a craft. It's more crafted, I guess, if that's the best way to put it.
And there's other details that come out too. Sorry. Yeah, there's other details that come out too, of like little personal touches that people throw into their costumes. Like, they may have the Triforce on there, but maybe they put it in their non-binary flag colors, just as like a small little toss towards themselves, or just other tiny details that just personalize it and make it their own. And those are the details that I've started looking for, and love just seeing like, what was your story in putting this together?
One of the fun things I did a couple years ago, we did my local unit, the Green Mountain Squad, which is the Vermont 501st unit. We marched in the Burlington's Pride Parade. We have a number of members who are part of the community, and I'm not. But I wanted to sort of go because it was going to be a fun time, and I wanted to help support that. So what I did with my shore trooper is normally it's a blue shoulder belt, or one of the shoulder belts is half blue and the other half is tan. The other half is has some other coloring. So I basically I repainted. I had a spare set, so I basically repainted so that there were rainbow on one side, and I don't remember what I had on the other side. Just to sort of just make the costume blend a little bit better into, sort of give it a little bit more of a Pride theme, just to sort of blend in with the surroundings a little bit more, and weathered it up so that it looked just like the rest of the costume. And it was a fun little project to do, and it just made the costume just a little bit different. And it got some good responses from folks in the background who recognized that it was what it was for what it was. So
that's awesome.
It was a fun little project to do, and we've done other things as well. I think I've got a spare set. I think next time I do like a breast cancer walk or some sort of charity walk, I'll repaint the other one so that it matches whatever charity that is. But it's like a fun little Easter egg or a fun little nod that you can throw in there. But as I said, I come from a tradition where the 501st, we have a fairly rigorous set of standards, so I don't deviate too much with my costumes. But again, if I'm not doing a 501st event, there's there's no stopping me from repainting one of my costumes into a different color. I have a first order stormtrooper, and one of the things I really want to do with it is paint it so it looks completely battle damaged and completely scuffed
nice.
up. Sort of like the clone I have. The clone is I really dirtied it up for. I give it a repaint a couple years ago, and I really just made it look a lot more battle damaged than it. And yeah, that weathering sort of I always see weathering as a bit of a story. So like, you can look at it and say like, all right, this, and that was always the reaction I got with it because I had already scratched and scuffed it and whatnot. But this was a little bit more of a little bit better job, I think, of it. But yeah, people would say like, "Oh, yeah, you're the guy who stepped on a grenade, or you've seen some action," and it pulls people into that environment, and it's that detail that lets them sort of immerse themselves, even if it's just for a moment, and trying to like think about like why that costume might look like that.
So this has been absolutely delightful. I want to end on one last question for you, Andrew, and that's what's the best cosplay advice you've ever gotten?
Always wear safety goggles or safety glasses. And that I have seen one of the things that I've gotten sucked into on Instagram is and I think I've trained my particular Instagram algorithm to do this, is to sort of show up work fails. Which I will then send to my brother who works as a painter and amongst other things. Yeah, people falling off ladders. It's really great fun for, an Instagram video, but like if I've seen way too many videos of people with a cutting disc or something, right in the middle of their safety glasses.
Oh, that's so scary.
Yeah, that's not something I ever want to do. But along the same lines, wear a respirator when you're working on resin dust. Oh, I built my clone trooper in my apartment, which didn't have any ventilation, and that was not probably the smartest of moves. But like there's a trend that was going around not too long ago where somebody was saying that they were putting acetone into an airbrush and spraying it onto 3D printed armor as a way to smooth it. And I'm just like, no, that is not good advice. Do not do that because, that's not good to get in your lungs. No. And same thing with, I think they were putting some sort of resin, some sort of really thinned out resin into an air spray. And, aerosolizing those things are just, it's bad news. This is not a hobby that's worth dying for.
No. So in that vein.
Yeah, the best advice I could give is always make sure that, this is a technical thing. You don't want to irreparably damage yourself by doing it. And I've had my share of long parades where I've got a scar on my leg from this past year's the Macy's Day Parade. I was one of the stormtroopers that marched, and I still have a scar from where something had broken loose and it had been dug into my leg for however several miles long that march was.
Right. Oh man.
And there's always like sort of like the arm, we call them armor bites, like I've had blood drawn from cuts that I've gotten from stuff that let me just say, like, if you're going to test out a costume, don't make it like a 2 to 3 or 4 mile parade where you can't stop where you haven't quite worked out where all the sharp bits of your armor is, because having a bit of sharp plastic digging into your groin after a mile is not fun, and I don't recommend it.
So speaking of armor bites and bad ventilation, we like to end on cosplay horror stories. Do you have one you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, so I it's also appropriate because Attack the Clones. I have a Attack the Clones era clone trooper, sure. And I like the kit quite a bit. It's thick plastic. It's very durable. The problem is that when you have plastic that is curved and is moving a lot, it can tend to break. So the belt on that is plastic, and it's sort of multi-shaped. So it's basically a band of plastic, and it's got like the belt boxes sort of like some of the detailing is sort of worked in there, right? And so there's some weak points in it because it's plastic and it moves around a little bit. So I was at a troop at a museum, and the armor was on just fine. We were shuffling into an elevator, and somebody bumped me just hard enough that the belt snapped in half, and like my entire lower torso comes crashing down. And so, yeah, that was like a moment, because like all of a sudden, half my costume is missing, and I have to sort of hold it up and sort of waddle out back to the our changing area and try to fix it. So that was fun. I still have that belt, and I still use it. It's been patched. I actually have a replacement that I bought a couple years ago that I still have not quite finished up yet.
Scary. Oh, man. So,
so
Andrew,
that's that.
Yeah. One more time, what's the name of your book, and where can we find you online?
You can find me online at Andrew Liptak on Twitter, at Liptaka, Liptaka on Instagram. I have a Facebook page. If you just type in Andrew Liptak, you'll find the page. And newsletter is called Transfer Orbit, transfer-orbit.ghost.io. And the book itself is Cosplay, a history, the builders, fans, and makers who bring your favorite stories to life.
Woo!
Did it all one breath.
Awesome. All right. Listeners at home, if you have any follow-up questions, or if you want to tell us one of your cosplay horror stories, you can do that at cosplaystitchandseam@gmail.com, or
you can go to the website and fill out the contact form at cosplaystitchandseam.com, or
go to the Facebook page. And while you're there, tell us what you're working on. We would love to hear everything that you've got going on. And if you're not a big Facebook fan, we do have our Discord, like we mentioned. If you go to our website, there's a link to it right there. You'll be able to join us while you're on the internet. If you want to help out the show and you've got some time, we really appreciate it. I want to thank the 21 of you who left a rating on Spotify. That means the world to us. Thank you so much. It's like a brand new feature. It's only on mobile. So to see that like a small group of us have already gotten the chance to do that means the world to us. You can also leave a review on Apple Podcast, on Podchaser, wherever they let you. Let us know, and we'll even give you a shout out on the show. Speaking of shout outs, we do have some patrons that we want to give a shout out to for the $3 and $5 tier at Cosplay Stitch and Seam. Some of those amazing people are Rose Does, Livy Cheney, Yggdrasil, Dr. Steggy, PB and James, Cynics, at Queer Eye Sci-Fi, Hot Riku, Red Amira, Jazzy Kofad, Jaguar Quinn, Gloria Shu, Sudi, Shock H, and Silver D.
Thank you so much, guys. You can also check out foxbeauty.store. Use our promo code Stitch and Seam to get 10% off your purchase of all vegan, not tested on animal products made by a cosplayer like you. Thanks as always to Macy Roberts for the use of her music as our theme song, and David Jeffress for his amazing editing. How are your podcasts going, David?
They are going so well. Last Voice, Season 2, up and running. Go listen to it right now. It is up. It is exciting. I'm very proud of the writing that I've done all about this. Like I talked about it on our last episode. Go check it out.
Yeah.
It's great. It's so good. If you're not a big fan of audio dramas and zombies and all the post-apocalyptic stuff that comes with that, I do have a comic book podcast called Comic Trades Monthly, where we talk about your favorite comic book collection in a book club format. We just finished talking about Mark Waid's complete collection of Deadpool, probably the definitive Deadpool. So if you want to know a little bit more about the history of Deadpool, go over and check out that episode.
Amazing. Hey, Mercedes, you ready for a bad joke to end off the episode?
Uh-oh. I'm waiting. I'm bracing for it.
Where do you take someone who has been injured while playing peekaboo? The ICU.
Oh, no.
All right. Bye, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Sorry,
Sure.
am I allowed to swear?
We can bleep it out. You're good.
Okay. I just want to make sure you've got tons of kids. If you got tons of kids listening, I guess I'll try to restrain myself. Anyway,
I have to do that all the time.